Welcome to the Bigfoot Chronicles. I'm Dr. Graham Richards, and this is Episode 1. Let me start with a confession. I never thought I'd be here, speaking into a microphone about something I once considered folklore, fantasy, and frankly, nonsense. I'm a biologist. My degrees are framed on the wall behind me. My research has focused on ecosystems, mammalian evolution, and cryptic species classification. I've published in peer-reviewed journals. I've taught field biology at the university level. I've dissected enough scat samples and mapped enough habitat zones to know how quickly a story can unravel when it's pressed under scientific scrutiny. And yet here I am, starting a podcast about Bigfoot. Not as a joke, not as satire, but as a serious inquiry into something I've come to believe may be more than myth, something that walks between worlds, the scientific and the unexplained. Let me take you back to the beginning. I first heard about Bigfoot the way most of us do, as a child. Grainy documentaries on late-night TV, campfire tales in the Rockies, an old uncle with a story that was half whiskey and half warning. I tucked it away in the drawer labeled cultural oddities. Fascinating, yes. Believable? Not remotely. I pursued science, earned my PhD in biological sciences, specializing in mammalian adaptation. I studied wolves, bears, elk, real animals, grounded in observable behavior and fossil lineage. My lab had nothing on its shelves labeled Cryptid, and that was fine by me. But there was something that never quite left me. Not the stories, but the witnesses. The calm, rural people who never asked for attention. The experienced trackers, the forestry officials, the hunters with 1,000 kills under their belts who swore up and down that what they saw wasn't a bear, wasn't a man, and wasn't explainable. Eventually I started keeping a journal. Just notes, really. Witness names, locations, consistencies in vocalizations, footprint dimensions, descriptions of behavior. After a few years, the list grew too long to ignore. And here's the strange part. It wasn't the outlandish stories that got to me. It was the pattern, the ecological consistency. These weren't scattered tales from fantasy-addled minds. They were describing something that lived like a real animal, traveled like one, hid like one, behaved alarmingly like an apex primate. So I gave myself permission to look deeper. That's how this journey began. In this episode, I want to walk you through the framework of Bigfoot lore. I won't be proving anything today. I won't be trying to convert anyone. That's not what this podcast is about. It's about exploring the possibility with the same tools I use in science: observation, skepticism, pattern recognition, and an open mind. Let's start with the name, Bigfoot. It's a nickname that's both iconic and unfortunate, too cartoonish, too tabloid. But the name stuck after 1958, when journalist Andrew Genzoli used it in a Humboldt Times article about oversized footprints found in Northern California. The rest, as they say, is history. But the history goes much deeper. Across North America, and indeed globally, we find indigenous lore describing large, hair-covered beings of the forest. The Salish have the Saskets, the origin of the term Sasquatch. The Hopi speak of the Yohei, and in the Appalachian region, we hear of wood boogers and skunk apes. Even in Tibet, we have the Yeti. In Australia, the Yowie. In Russia, the Almasty. These aren't just regional myths. They're strikingly similar descriptions of upright hairy humanoids across entirely separate cultures, often with overlapping behaviors: nocturnal, elusive, territorial, and vocal. My question as a biologist became, could these be distant cultural echoes of an actual species, A shared experience with something undocumented? Let's talk biology. Most eyewitness reports describe a creature between 6.5 and 9 feet tall, weighing anywhere from 400 to 800 pounds, covered in hair, often brown, black, or reddish. It walks upright with a smooth, gliding gait, very different from the clumsy lumbering of a bear. Long arms, broad shoulders, no visible neck. Many witnesses mention a conical head shape, deep-set eyes, and a flat nose. Some describe a smell, musky, overpowering, like wet dog and rot. Now, I ask you, if this is a hoax, how is it so consistent? The ecological question is more difficult. Where do they live? What do they eat? Why no bones? Well, if Bigfoot exists, it's likely an omnivorous generalist. Berries, roots, small game, carrion, fish. They'd need vast territories, prefer thick, unpopulated forests, which, by the way, North America still has plenty of. As for remains, let me be blunt. Nature is efficient. Carcasses vanish quickly in the wild. Bones are scavenged, buried, eroded. Even for known species like cougars or wolverines, we rarely find remains. It's not proof of absence. It's just absence of proof. In future episodes, I'll dive deep into the 3 kinds of physical evidence often cited: audio recordings, footprint casts, and what some call tree structures. For now, I'll touch lightly on each. The Sierra Sounds, recorded in the 1970s by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry, remain controversial. They captured strange whooping vocalizations, chatter that seems patterned. Some linguists suggest the presence of syntax. Others dismiss it as mimicry or fabrication. I'll let you decide. Footprints? That's where it gets weird. I've examined casts showing dermal ridges, patterns you find in primate skin. Some show mid-tarsal breaks, flexing at a point that matches non-human primates, not humans. Could these be hoaxes? Sure. But some would require advanced anatomical knowledge. Tree structures, teepee-like arrangements, arches, and bent saplings are often dismissed as a windfall or coincidence. But when you find them deep in areas untouched by people, it gives you pause. Again, none of this is conclusive, but taken together, there's a shape forming in the fog. I want to close today's episode by focusing on the people. The Bigfoot community is complicated. You've got hoaxers, diehards, rationalists, folklorists, and, yes, some outlandish fringe elements. But you also have witnesses, quiet, shaken, sincere. People who've never told their stories until now. Park rangers, loggers, soldiers, pilots, scientists. When someone's hands are shaking as they describe a pair of amber eyes watching from the trees, you feel it. I've seen too much to laugh anymore. And I've learned not to dismiss experience just because it doesn't fit neatly into a textbook. So where do I stand? On the edge, looking across the chasm between science and belief. And I'm starting to think there's something on the other side. That's all for episode 1 of the Bigfoot Chronicles. Next week, we'll explore the Patterson-Gimlin film, what it shows, what it doesn't, and why it still matters more than 50 years later. We'll also talk about primate locomotion and what a biologist sees in the gait of Patty, the figure in that famous footage. If you have a story, a theory, or a respectful question, send it to bigfootchroniclespod@protonmail.com. I read every email. Until then, stay grounded, and maybe, just maybe, stay alert on the trail. Good night from the forest's edge. You're listening to the Bigfoot Chronicles. I'm Dr. Graham Richards, and this is Episode 2. Tonight we're going to talk about a film, not a Hollywood production, not a viral clip. A film that's only 59 seconds long, shot in 1967 with a handheld 16mm camera. A film that's been analyzed more than the Zapruder footage and debated in nearly every Bigfoot discussion since the day it surfaced. I'm talking about the Patterson-Gimlin film. If you're new to this world, that name might not mean much yet. But if you've spent any time exploring the question of Bigfoot's existence, you already know the scene. A forest clearing in Bluff Creek, California. A massive, hair-covered figure striding away, glancing back over its shoulder, then disappearing into the trees. That look, that moment. It's burned into the collective memory of cryptozoology. And tonight, I want to break it down. Not just what it shows, but what it means. And why, nearly 6 decades later, we're still arguing about whether we're seeing a hoax or history. Let's set the scene. October 20th, 1967. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, 2 amateur investigators with a borrowed camera and a horse trailer, are riding deep into the Bluff Creek area of Northern California. Patterson had been interested in Bigfoot for some time. He'd even published a book the year before, combining folklore and witness accounts. That day, something happened. They claimed they came around a bend in the creek and spotted a large, upright creature walking away from them along the sandbar. Patterson dismounted in a rush, grabbed the camera, and ran after it, capturing that iconic footage, shaky and brief. There's a lot of legend surrounding what happened next. Some say they chased the creature briefly. Others say it vanished quickly into the timber. But what we have is the film. And that's where the controversy begins. If you've never watched it closely, I recommend finding the stabilized versions online. There are versions where digital experts have removed the camera shake and enhanced the resolution, allowing a cleaner look at the figure now nicknamed Patty. Here's what I see as a biologist. The creature in the film moves with remarkable fluidity. The arms are long, proportionally longer than a human's. The gait is heavy, deliberate, but smooth, no bounce. The leg movement includes what we call a compliant gait, very different from the mechanical walk of someone in a suit. There's muscle definition, especially in the thigh and shoulder. Now, could it be a costume? That's the question skeptics have asked since day one. And fair enough, costumes existed in 1967. But remember this, no costume from that era, not even in major studio productions, shows the kind of muscular movement seen in this film. No zipper, no sag, no seams. And then there's the anatomy. The creature's torso is barrel-shaped, not V-shaped like a man in a suit. The head is small, sloped, set low into the shoulders. The arms swing in a wide arc, like a great ape. And that famous glance over the shoulder, it's brief, yes, but loaded with presence. To me, as someone trained in primate locomotion, I can tell you, it doesn't move like a man pretending to be a beast. It moves like something that's lived that way its entire life. Let's be fair. There are people who claim it was all a fabrication. Some say Roger Patterson was a con man, a dreamer who wanted fame. A man named Bob Hieronymus came forward in the 1990s claiming he was the one in the suit. He even passed a polygraph, but he never produced the suit itself, and his story has shifted over the years. Costume experts have weighed in on both sides. Some say it could have been built with horsehair and foam. Others say it couldn't be done without showing some mechanical flaw. In the scientific community, the film was largely ignored. No institution wanted to risk its credibility by analyzing it seriously. That's still true today. But I'll be honest, as hoaxes go, it's almost too perfect. If it was faked, it was done with a level of anatomical insight, filmmaking control, and biological consistency that would have been far ahead of its time. And if it wasn't, well, that changes everything. Let's not forget the setting. Bluff Creek isn't just scenic, it's ideal. Dense conifers, deep canyons, rugged terrain, nearby water, abundant deer, fish, berries, and root vegetables. It's an ecosystem capable of supporting an elusive omnivore. And with a low human population density, it's also perfect for something that doesn't want to be seen. I've been to Bluff Creek. I've hiked the ridges. When the wind dies, you hear your own breathing. The silence is alive. You could hide something there, a tribe of somethings, and never know it. There have been dozens of sightings in the area since 1967, not just by tourists or enthusiasts, but by loggers, rangers, and residents. They all point to the same thing, something massive, intelligent, and quiet. Let's step back. Why does this matter? Why has this short, shaky footage become a battleground of belief? Because it's one of the only pieces of evidence we can watch, rewind, and argue about endlessly. It represents a kind of standstill, science unwilling to touch it, belief unwilling to let it go. It also reveals something about human psychology. We're desperate to classify, to define. We don't like edges. We want things squarely in the box, real or fake, beast or myth. But this film refuses to sit neatly in either box. It just exists. A stubborn, beautiful, mysterious moment caught in time. And I believe that's why it still grips us. In an ideal world, the Patterson-Gimlin film would have triggered a wave of scientific curiosity. Field studies, funding, habitat mapping, audio traps, long-term observation stations in high sighting zones. Instead, we got silence, ridicule, the smirk of polite dismissal. And yet, the sightings didn't stop. The tracks didn't stop. The questions didn't stop. I'm not here to declare the film definitive proof, but I am here to say it deserves more than a shrug. It deserves rigorous inquiry, the kind we apply to anything with consistent, repeatable patterns. And this story has patterns. So, what do I think? I think something was filmed in Bluff Creek that day. Something extraordinary. Something upright, biological, and entirely out of place. And if we're willing to meet it halfway, not with blind belief, but with scientific courage, we might just learn something that changes the story of life on Earth. Or maybe it changes our story. The story of how we've forgotten to look just beyond the tree line. That's it for this episode of the Bigfoot Chronicles. Next time, we're going to talk about tracks, footprints, dermal ridges, mid-tarsal breaks, and what they might tell us about anatomy and movement. We'll also examine a few famous casts and a few infamous fakes. Until then, stay curious, stay grounded, and as always, stay alert on the trail. Good night. You're listening to the Bigfoot Chronicles. I'm Dr. Graham Richards, and this is Episode 3, The Language of Footprints. Tonight, we're going to study something ancient, something primal, something that, in all species, ours included, comes before words, before symbols, before tools. We're going to study tracks, not metaphors, not myths, footprints, physical impressions, compressions in mud, moss, snow, and soil, what the old trackers call sign, the quiet trail of weight and pressure and form left behind by a living creature. And in the world of Bigfoot, tracks are everything. They're the closest thing we have to recurring physical evidence. They're tangible, measurable. You can hold them, photograph them, cast them, analyze them under magnification. And for over a century, they've been turning up in places where people report encounters, and sometimes in places where nobody was supposed to be at all. So let's take a long, deliberate walk through that evidence. Let's follow the trail, one step at a time. I want to begin with a memory. In 2004, I was on a field expedition in coastal British Columbia, studying bear migration patterns. We had just finished tracking a juvenile grizzly's radio collar data and were packing up for the night. As I was walking along a gravel bank near a stream, I spotted a print. Not a bear, not human. It was about 16 inches long, wide at the ball, narrowing only slightly at the heel. 5 clear toes, a mid-foot curve I didn't recognize. At first I thought, hoax. I bent down. The depth was consistent. Same pressure from heel to ball. No heel slippage. No signs of carving or digging. The stride was nearly 50 inches. That's over 4 feet between steps. Something heavy had passed through. Something bipedal. I didn't cast it. I regret that now. At the time, I filed it under unknown anomaly. But it stayed with me. Because as a biologist, I'm trained to look for pressure patterns. How mass displaces soil. How gait leaves traces. That print behaved correctly. I think that moment was when the trail really began for me. Bigfoot tracks aren't a modern invention. The earliest documented footprint sightings go back to the 19th century. Miners, trappers, and early settlers in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia recorded seeing enormous human-like footprints in the snow, often far from any trail or homestead. In 1951, mountaineer Eric Shipton photographed a strange footprint in the Himalayas, widely attributed to the Yeti. That print, found near Menlung Glacier, became one of the most famous cryptid images of the century. But it was in 1958, at a logging site near Bluff Creek, California, that the modern Bigfoot footprint phenomenon exploded. A bulldozer operator named Jerry Crew found giant tracks around his equipment. He made plaster casts. A local reporter ran a story, and the word Bigfoot entered the American lexicon. Many dismissed it as a prank. Years later, a man named Ray Wallace was accused of faking some of those prints with carved wooden feet, and it's possible some were hoaxed. But here's the thing. After that article ran, the tracks didn't stop. They kept appearing, all across the Pacific Northwest, the Appalachians, Northern California, and even in remote pockets of Canada and Alaska, sometimes in snow, sometimes in mud, always just outside the bounds of easy dismissal. Let's talk structure. Human feet have 26 bones and 33 joints. Our arches are tuned for walking upright. Our toes are relatively short with limited gripping function. Apes, on the other hand, have flatter feet and opposable big toes for climbing. Bigfoot prints, in theory, reflect a third path. What I and others have observed in credible casts are the following characteristics. Length, typically 14 to 19 inches. Width, often 6 to 9 inches across the ball of the foot. Toes, 5, evenly spaced, rarely splayed. Occasionally, the smallest toe is fully imprinted, something that rarely happens in human walking patterns. Mid-tarsal break. This is a big one. Most humans have a rigid arch, but many primates, gorillas, chimps, and orangutans have a flexible midfoot, allowing their foot to bend in the middle for gripping. Some Bigfoot prints show clear evidence of a mid-tarsal break, suggesting a powerful, flexible foot unlike our own. Dermatoglyphics, Friction ridges, the same that form fingerprints, have been documented on some casts. That level of detail is hard to fake. It would require careful anatomical knowledge and mold manipulation. And perhaps most intriguing of all, some tracks show injury. There are casts from Washington State that show what appears to be a clubbed toe. Others show signs of healed breaks or walking asymmetry. If this is fakery, it's detailed fakery with biological realism. So the question becomes, who would go to that much trouble in such remote places for no audience? Let's discuss the process. When a potential Bigfoot footprint is found, the ideal response is to document everything: measurements, soil composition, weather conditions. Then a plaster or resin cast can be made, creating a three-dimensional replica for study. Some of the most famous casts include the Bossberg cripple foot tracks, discovered in Washington in 1969. These show anatomical deformities consistent with a clubfoot. Some experts say the biomechanics in the print are so complex, they'd be almost impossible to fake. The Grays Harbor series, multiple prints showing a consistent individual track maker. The stride, toe depth, and pressure patterns are incredibly uniform. The Freeman tracks, Paul Freeman, a U.S. Forest Service patrolman, found and cast numerous prints in Oregon and Washington. His footage and tracks remain controversial, but many scientists privately admit their consistency is troubling. I've handled some of these casts myself. There's a weight to them, not just physical, but narrative. A sense that something real pressed down into soft earth, and that pressure traveled forward in time to us. Here's something I teach in wildlife tracking. Prints aren't just static impressions. They're movement frozen in time. They tell stories. A deep toe impression might suggest the creature was pushing off, maybe startled. A heavy heel means the step was slow, deliberate. Splayed toes, maybe a turn, a stumble, a shift in weight, a pause. I've reviewed trackways showing abrupt direction changes, sharp pivots no human could make comfortably in rugged terrain. Others show single steps over 6 feet long, beyond what even a professional athlete could stride across without a run-up. Some show one foot dragging slightly. Others leave toe drag marks, suggesting barefoot movement over obstacles. And there's something else. In many credible tracks, the pressure depth decreases uphill, just like in real animals. Hoaxers tend to press wooden molds straight down. They can't replicate the shifting pressure of a real foot over uneven terrain. These are little things, but they build a picture, one footprint at a time. Let's not be naive. Hoaxes exist. There are pranksters. There are gotcha creators. There are folks who want to be part of the legend. Some fake tracks with carved wooden feet, snowshoes, or even elaborate prosthetics. Others simply press their own bare feet into soft mud and exaggerate the stride. But here's what I've learned. Hoax tracks tend to scream for attention. Perfect symmetry, clean edges, always centered, often placed right near trails or camps. Real tracks, if such a thing exists, tend to hide. They're partial, weathered, hard to find. They fade quickly. And they show variation, injury, uneven wear. Things humans tend not to fake because they aren't glamorous. I don't dismiss all prints because of some fakes. That's not science. That's ideology. In biology, we know how to filter noise. We isolate patterns. And in these prints, patterns exist. So why focus on footprints? Because they're the one form of evidence that's both biological and reproducible. A sighting fades. A sound distorts. A blurry photo is easily dismissed. But a cast, you can weigh it, measure it, analyze gait, cross-compare it with others. It's a biological thumbprint of something that once walked through the world. To some, these are just hoaxes or misidentified bear tracks. To others, they're the footprints of a living, breathing creature we've yet to officially acknowledge. To me, they are a mystery worth pursuing. Because if these tracks are real, something is still walking alongside us. Something quiet, something cautious, something ancient, and it's leaving messages in the mud. That's all for this episode of the Bigfoot Chronicles. Next week, we'll explore the sounds, the whoops, howls, knocks, and chatter that have been recorded across North America, and what they might tell us about communication, intelligence, and the possibility of language. Until then, keep your eyes on the ground, your ears in the trees, and always stay alert on the trail. Good night from the edge of the unknown. Welcome back to the Bigfoot Chronicles. I'm Dr. Graham Richards, and this is Episode 4, The Forest Speaks. Over the last few weeks, we've studied the evidence left behind by footprints. We've examined frames of old film. We've listened to eyewitness testimony. But tonight, we do something different. Tonight, we listen. Because sometimes the forest speaks back. In this episode, we explore the vocal world of the creature we call Bigfoot. The howls, the screams, the knocks, the chatter. Some heard in darkness, some recorded by chance, and others witnessed with a fear so primal that it bypasses language altogether. Are they animals defending territory? Are they communicating? Are they imitating us? Or are they warning us? Let's step into the night and listen. Let me begin with a personal story. It was 2011. I was camping alone in a remote valley of Vancouver Island, west of Cowichan Lake. I was there to monitor a rewilding corridor for wolves, setting up trail cameras, collecting scat samples, standard work. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound I will never forget. It wasn't a wolf. I know wolves. This was deeper, more guttural. A long, rising moan that swelled into a bellow, like an air raid siren filtered through flesh and lungs. Then silence. And then, from the opposite ridge, an answer. Shorter, sharper, like a bark wrapped in language. I sat frozen in my tent, notebook in my hand, knowing I'd heard something unusual. Not just animal, not just instinct. Communication. The next morning, I found no tracks. But that sound, it echoes in my mind even now. I recorded nothing, but the memory is precise. Now, I want to walk you through what many consider to be the vocal core of Bigfoot research. These are some of the most debated sound recordings in cryptid history. Each has its detractors, yes, but each also offers something curious, something biological, something not so easily dismissed. Let's begin with the Sierra Sounds, recorded 1972 to 1974. Captured by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry at a hunting camp in the Sierra Nevada mountains, these recordings feature rapid percussive vocalizations, whooping calls, moaning howls, and a kind of samurai chatter that some claim resembles language. Linguist Scott Nelson, formerly of the U.S. Navy's Cryptolinguistics Department, studied the Sierra Sounds and concluded they exhibit morphology, syntax, and phonetic patterns consistent with language. He argued these were not random animal noises or human gibberish, but structured utterances. Skeptics argue the recordings are faked, human voices slowed down, masked by echo. But to date, no one has definitively recreated them convincingly. And the recordings feature overlapping calls, simultaneous speakers, and powerful diaphragmatic resonance beyond human capacity. What strikes me isn't just the sounds, it's the pauses, the turn-taking, the rhythm of something, responding. Let's pause and get anatomical. Human vocalizations are shaped by lung capacity, vocal fold length, and laryngeal positioning. Most adult men vocalize in the 85 to 180 Hz range. Trained basses can go lower. Gorillas average around 100 to 120 Hz. Some Bigfoot vocalizations drop below 80 Hz. That's seismic, chest shaking. You feel it more than hear it. These are not the frequencies you get from casual hoaxers with a tape recorder. This is biomechanical. And then there's volume. Some field recordings, like the Ohio Howl or the 1994 Mississippi Screams, measure well above 110 decibels at distance. That's lion-level projection. How do we explain that? Some suggest a massive chest cavity and high lung capacity. Others speculate a dual-chambered vocal tract, similar to how howler monkeys use resonant sacs to amplify calls. Still others say it sounds too intentional. But vocal sounds aren't the only form of communication attributed to Bigfoot. One of the most consistent field reports involves wood knocks, sharp rhythmic impacts resembling a tree being struck with a club. They're heard in series of 2 or 3, often before or after vocalizations, sometimes as a response to human-made knocks. Hunters, hikers, even biologists have reported exchanging knocks with something in the woods, only to receive answers from multiple directions. No visible source, just reverberating percussion echoing through the trees. And then there's stone throwing. Not small rocks, not pebbles, but grapefruit-sized stones lobbed near campsites. Rarely aimed at people, almost never hitting anyone, but always just close enough to register a warning. That's not random. That's a message. And when we study primates, chimps, gorillas, orangutans, we see similar behaviors: territorial displays, warning signals, object manipulation to intimidate or alert. We may be witnessing the same thing in the deep woods, only from something more intelligent. This is where things get strange. Many seasoned outdoors people report hearing mimicry in the forest. Imitated birds, garbled speech, echoed phrases, even names whispered back hours after being said aloud. I spoke to a tracker in Oregon who swore he heard his own voice repeated from a tree line in perfect intonation. His words played back like an echo from something that had been listening. Another camper reported hearing a baby crying in the middle of the Cascades. There were no families within 20 miles, just them and the sound. What makes this particularly unsettling is the timing. The mimicked sounds almost always occur after human presence is established, not before. As if something is watching, learning, testing. Now, could these be birds, coyotes, echoes? Possibly. But they're close. Too close. And in primates, vocal mimicry is a sign of advanced cognition, intelligence, curiosity. So, what's mimicking us? I want to share just a few of the more compelling field accounts involving sound. These come from people with nothing to gain. Some even ask to remain anonymous. A park ranger in Utah told me he heard a 2-tone whistle followed by 3 wood knocks, like a code. His horse refused to move forward afterward. A wildlife biologist in Idaho said he recorded a deep howl that triggered elk to scatter. The howl had no match in any database of North American fauna. A retired soldier camping in Pennsylvania heard what he described as chanting, low and rhythmic, but unintelligible. He likened it to monks in a cave. No one else was within miles. I've now collected over 70 separate reports involving vocal phenomena from witnesses with law enforcement, forestry, military, or biological backgrounds. They don't all match in tone, but the themes are consistent. Something heard, something responding, something too close, too human, and not human at all. So the question becomes, is this communication, or is it language? Communication is universal. Ants do it. Trees do it through chemical signals. Wolves howl to locate the pack. Birds chirp to signal food or danger. But language is symbolic, abstract. Language involves grammar, intent, syntax. It separates immediate meaning from representational thought. Could Bigfoot possess a language? The Sierra sounds suggest something close. Some field researchers claim patterns in repeated knocks. Others think long whoops mean presence. Short whoops mean alarm. And what if the mimicry is a form of vocabulary? If that's true, we're not just dealing with a hominid, we're dealing with a culture. And that changes everything. Here's the hardest part of all this. The sound evidence is vast, but it's also fragile. No one has built a long-term, wide-scale bioacoustic monitoring program for Bigfoot vocalizations. No government agency funds sonic surveillance in hot zones. No university is leading a neural network pattern analysis across decades of audio, because science still laughs at the question. And yet, when you're alone in the forest and you hear it, that sound, that impossible call, you stop laughing. You start listening. I can't prove what we're hearing, but I can say this. The frequency ranges are real. The decibel levels are unexplainable. The patterns are consistent across time and geography, and many of these sounds cannot be reliably attributed to known species. Something is making these sounds, and it knows we're listening. Maybe one day we'll find a translator, a Rosetta Stone of the woods. But until then, I believe we must approach the forest with humility. Because it's not just us doing the watching, the forest is watching back. And sometimes, just sometimes, it speaks. That's all for episode 4 of the Bigfoot Chronicles. Next time, we'll explore the idea of Bigfoot migration and territory, what seasonal patterns might exist, how sightings shift geographically, and whether there's an underlying intelligence to how they move. If you've heard something in the woods that no animal should have made, I want to hear your story. Send your audio files or testimony to bigfootchroniclespod@protonmail.com. Until then, keep your ears open, keep your mind sharp, and always, always, stay alert on the trail. Good night.